What's going on, everybody? Just want to let you know our sponsors going forward for our future episodes. We are sponsored by Red Clover Coffee. So if you go to redclovercoffee.com and type in code IWP at checkout, you'll save 10% site-wide. Also, we are sponsored by Performance Supplements. So if you go over to performancesup with 2ps.com and type in code IWP at checkout, you'll save 15% site-wide. And our third sponsor is we are sponsored by Crunch Fitness up here in Northern California. Thank you, guys. All right, guys, welcome back for part 3. If you've been following along, we are talking with Eli over here. He is the Ukrainian survivor, volunteer. He knows all the ins and outs, in my opinion, over there going on, in zero propaganda for the Russia-Ukraine war. So we're going to dive right into this one. If you followed us on the part 2, we're going to talk about the Wagner Group and Chernobyl on this one. So let's go ahead and start it off, man, and get right into it. Let's just start talking about the Wagner Group. And can you update us and let us know and inform everybody just what the Wagner Group is and what they do?
So basically, they're a mercenary group, kind of like not BlackRock. What did we say it was?
Blackwater.
Blackwater, that's it. Yeah, so the government has full control over them. The original, basically the original startup by Prigozhin, he was a ex-convict who found favor and he was a well-connected individual. And slowly and surely, he started off as a chef. He had a restaurant. And he kind of worked his way through the elites and somehow managed to position himself very nicely with the Russian government, and ended up getting contracts to feed schools, feed government facilities, and that basically made him skyrocket into stardom amongst the government elites. The idea of Wagner, I don't know the exact how it was proposed or whatever, but I know that it basically worked the exact same way. Hey, the Russian government needed somebody to do some dirty work for them, just like any other government. They decided to set this up, and he pitched it in such a way like, hey, how about I run this for you? We'll do whatever you want. You say it, we'll go do it. And I'm sure there was a couple of trial runs. The missions were accomplished, and basically that's what it came off from. Because the Russian government, two things. One, the Russian government always wants to save face, just like any other government. And two, it's like, so you have a task. For example, they send out their military to Syria. I don't know if you heard of the story of where. Okay, so there's a hotline between the Russian military and the U.S. military in Syria, and basically, just so they don't start shooting each other by accident, they're like, "Hey guys, we're moving through the area," letting them know where they're going. Anyways, there was an incident where the U.S. military picked up movement towards them and fire, and so they returned. They first. They thought it was just accidental fire. They called the Russians. They're like, "Hey, listen, is this you guys? You're hitting our positions." Then they're like, "Oh, no, it's not us. It's not us." So,
of course,
basically, the U.S. military is like, "All right, guys, well, it's not them. Let them have it." And they basically just pretty much demolished the attack, to the point where the Russians called them back saying, "Hey guys, it's actually us. You're hitting our positions. We're just, here accidentally. You're hitting our positions, right?" So to make a long story short, that's how they kind of operate, trying to save face, but move quiet and deadly, right? So fast forward to 2014. You have to understand something. Like it's like. This is like the Wagner Group is a one-stop shop. So it's like you need to send people to another country to overthrow the government, to crowd control, to whatever. There's not like 1,000 people working there. There's thousands of contractors working there. You go in there, it's like you apply for the job. Hey, I want to be a security guard. I want to be whatever. okay, well, take you through the test run, go do a little bit of shooting, go do a little bit of this, that. They're like, okay, all right, you're in, and then from that point, you're just on their payroll. They pay you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just like any other organization.
So I was reading that they have had upwards of like 5,000 forces, and so in my head, I'm like 5,000, compared to anything else is like small, minuscule. And I know that Prigozhin was like getting and recruiting people out of jail, ex like special forces or special forces people to be in the Wagner Group. So if that is the case of having 5,000 people or less, or maybe a little bit more, why are they so feared if they don't, in my opinion, don't have that very many troops?
Well, picture this. So the difference between America and that part of the world is this. I have a good friend who is from St. Petersburg,
Mm-hmm.
and I was talking to him recently about firearms in the United in Russia,
Mm-hmm.
and he was telling me the tests that they have to do to obtain a firearm. So basically, they hook you up to you hook your head up to a electronic device which measures your not your instinct but your reaction time
Mm-hmm.
towards a light that they shine at you, and then they do like psychological evaluations. He's like, for me to have been able to obtain a rifle, it was crazy. He's like, I was shocked. There was so much I had to go through, versus, in the States here, what do? There's not much. Like, yeah, you get a background check to check if you're a criminal, that's pretty much it. But you don't go through like hardcore psychological evaluations or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they make it very hard. It's really, really tough. So why are they feared? Well, if you're in a country where 90% of the people are not armed, they do not have, the first, second, third, and they don't have the same amendments as we do in America.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the freedom of speech. They don't have,
right.
See, we were talking, and I said, why do you think is it that Russians don't go out on the street and protest? And it's just like, well, it's like, what's the point? Mm-hmm. It's either live quietly and, just grind away, or go protest, get arrested within half an hour, thrown into jail, and maybe get some broken ribs. What's the point? Yeah. Versus Ukraine, the people have lived through communism, and they have tasted what freedom is like, and there's no way in hell they're going back to that. There isn't. There just simply isn't. The reason why in Russia these Wagner guys are so feared is because they have access to not just weapons, but people know that, hey, one phone call, there's going to be, you're basically hitting a beehive.
Yeah.
And the second thing is that every single guy, every single individual that is working for this organization, just like in any organization, they know where you live, they know who your family is, they know everything about you, and there's nowhere to hide. So it's either you play ball, or, hey, guess what? You might, you might not have a house to come home to.
Yeah.
So, and they know that, and like living under so much, like, for example, there's in the 90s when the Soviet Union fell apart, in Russia they call them Kravyavi 90, which translates to the bloody 90s. Why? Because that's exactly where they were. There was so much murder. There was so much senseless killing, so much crime, so much gang wars, mafia wars, and it goes on and on. Like, there's a great documentary you can watch, actually, about a Russian gentleman who was living in Miami, and he was gun running, drug running, all this. The Russian mafia in the United States, FBI investigation or something like that. I can't remember. I watched it a long time ago. But the accessibility to weapons, the accessibility to anything was just staggering. It was just mind-blowing. Like, this guy had Colombians ask for a submarine, and they're like, can you get a sub? So he calls his friend in Russia and he's like, hey, is it possible? I know this might sound crazy. And is it possible for me to buy a submarine? And he's like, with missiles or without?
Take your pick.
Yeah. So, and then they actually flew down to Russia, and I'll have to find that documentary. It is so fascinating. It's mind blowing.
Wow.
It's just, yeah.
And I know that the Wagner Group in general, of course, they're all over in little spots here and there. Before we talk about the second topic here in like a minute, it's crazy to me because like even I think like recently in Africa before where Prigozhin was at, I think they were saying that the Wagner groups were actually, I guess, like captive or like some of them were captured by I guess like some type of like African army over there. Because I'm like, man, you think of Wagner, you think of it just like this big bag, like scary wolf in that sense. And then they go over to Africa, and then they just like randomly got like captured, I guess for some weird reason. I tried to look a little bit more into it, but my brain goes 100 miles an hour. So I was just wondering, like, why would they capture it if they knew they were coming in there? Because Russia is essentially all over that continent. So I was just kind of curious.
Alluding back to my comments, I forget what episode it was, but how the communist KGB operates, how the Russian Russian FSB operates. So before they even start doing anything, what they do is they go in there and they plant their people. So you can find this on YouTube, Russian pilots in Africa. And all they do basically is they have a couple old planes, and they basically are cargo planes, and they fly goods or cargo back and forth all over Africa. So that's already the first step, right? Like, so they have a couple of groups, they fly around Africa, they know what's going on, they're meeting the locals, whatever. They're putting their foot in the door. Now you have to understand, you don't need 100,000 people to infiltrate an organization. It doesn't take much. But there's a second thing you have to understand is the African culture, and you have to understand how people live there. Like, I don't know if you remember this. It's going to be a flashback for some people, but Kony 2012. Do you remember that?
Kony
2012. It was an African warlord. 2012. So it was like apparently it was this African warlord who was taking children captive and forcing them to fight for him or something like that of the sort.
Did he get executed?
But anyways, I can't remember. It was just so long ago.
Because that was during Obama's.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember it. I think I know what you're talking about now. Yeah, I remember.
So picture this. In Africa, you have so much weapons, so many AK-47s that Lord of War, one guy, he sent so much weapons down there. Like, there is an unlimited supply, right? So now you have all these little warlords all over Africa. You don't even know that some of them exist. Okay, and you have to understand, these people are not stupid. They're very intelligent. They're hunters. They're natural hunters. They're very smart. They know the area very well. How are you going to find a guy in the middle of the night, right? When there's 20 of them, they surround you, and they just you can't even feel them. They're used to walking around in the dark. It's wild. So of course, it's no surprise that some of these guys got captured. Especially, it's like this. It's like if I were to send you into a dark alley and or into a forest, what weapon would you choose? A knife or a gun? Well, if you have a gun, you're way more confident. If I give you a knife, you're going to be a lot more cautious. Yeah. Same thing with this. These guys are going down. It's like, oh, who's going to touch us? We're Russian special forces. When in reality, there's like constant people trying to take him out. That's just the sheer reality. Also, a little backup. If we back up a little bit, France has a huge heavy hand in Africa. They own quite a bit of these nations that pay. I guess they pay like some sort of a tax to France to this day or something like that. I can't remember off the top of my head. But they have a lot of power in there too. So if Putin wants Prigozhin dead, well, guess what? That works out for the French government, for the French Empire. So,
right. So let's jump to the Chernobyl aspect of this episode. So, I have notes here just because I can't like minimize out of the window, and I make notes all the time. But I know recently, when I say recently, I mean I could be wrong. Maybe within the past like 5 or 10 years, you can correct me. It essentially like it was always like active in a sense, but like embers, as they found out, like reactivated, and it's like a slow burn, is what they're saying. But the original part, the nuclear power plant back in 1986 on April 26th, they did like a very vague shutdown. They said it was 20 seconds. They did a shutdown, and in that shutdown, they did another test of their electrical equipment, and then 7 seconds later, it caused like a surge and a chemical explosion over there. So I believe there's 2 explosions, and it killed, from what I read, anywhere from 28 to 31 people. But it also released 520 dangerous 520 dangerous radionuclides into the atmosphere, and nobody lived there for the longest time. Now, let me fast forward to this real quick, and if you can shed some light on this. As of May 19th of this year, they were saying 1,200 people returned to their homes, disregarding the actions and potential risks to their health. As of today, 130 and 150 residents remain in the exclusion zone, citing their connections to their ancestral homes as too important to give up.
I'm gonna fast forward to
Sure.
or rewind from the beginning, from how this accident really started. So, this is gonna sound so surreal, and I know people are not gonna believe what I'm saying. Accidents do happen. I totally agree with that, and I want to believe that it was an accident, right? I really do. So I want everybody to just ask themselves this one question: how do we know that a person will die at like -20 if they're exposed to the elements at negative or at a certain temperature? The human body dies at negative. What Fahrenheit would be? I'm just gonna Google this real quick. Freeze to death.
On here, it was saying that what caused the accident, supposedly, now, like, again, this is online, it was saying that the number 4 RBMK reactor at the nuclear power plant went out of control during a test at low power, leading to an explosion and fire that demolished the reactor building and released large amounts of radiation.
Yeah. Anyways, how do we? Okay, so alluding, this will make sense after I'm done saying questioning this. So, how do we know that a human being is going to die at certain temperature? Well, they did tests. That's exactly how they found out. They literally did tests. On who? On prisoners. Anyway, so the way this reactor actually blew up was they just wanted to see how much it could produce and what would happen if it did blow up.
Okay.
The Soviet Union, the Soviet government, the Moscow, Russia, they knew in 1984 that 84, 85, they knew that that the Soviet Union is about to fall apart, and they literally have no more money to keep going. They just they knew the government, it was going to be over. So they figured, you know what, let's find out. Like, this is one of those tests. This is one of the tests that they try to do to figure out, 2 things. 1, what would be how much power we could produce, and 2, what's going to happen if it does blow up, and see the aftermath of it. It was literally a science experiment, whether we want to believe it or not. Second thing is, did you know that if it wasn't for the Swedes, we would have never find out about the Stockholm's. There's like these sensors in Stockholm apparently, and they picked up mass amounts of radiation
from
and
the
that's
newer
how
one,
the
right?
rest of no, this is still going back in 1986.
Oh, okay, wow.
If the Soviet government was trying to keep it at wraps and didn't want anybody to find out, right? Because they would look stupid. But in the end, Stockholm picked up like these massive radioactive signatures, and they ended up asking like, "Hey, what's going on?" We're picking, they started asking questions, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we kind of blew up this reactor." There's
they're kind of far away
forward.
too to pick something up like that, because they're by the Baltic, and Ukraine is a little bit more in, not too far, but from a signal to pick that up is pretty decent.
Well, absolutely. You have to understand when they blew up the Tsar bomb, the Soviets blew up the Tsar bomb. The U.S. picked up the afterwave shocks, the shock waves of this nuclear explosion.
NATO allies, huh?
Yeah. So I mean, they have like this crazy sensitive equipment that picks up all these anomalies. So then fast forward to, I think it's like 1998, 97, the Europeans, they're like, hey, listen, why don't we build a sarcophagus over this reactor for you guys? We'll help you out because we know you don't got anything. And they help them contain this. The only thing that I can think of that comes off the top of my head from the news in Ukraine is something might have blown up because the Russian, the Russian forces were in Chernobyl last year in 2022 in February when they first invaded. So I'm kind of pointing fingers right now, right? Because that was the last big event to happen in that area. Otherwise, nobody goes there. People understand you can die. You're gonna get
radiation
sickness.
Yeah.
Radiation sickness. Now here's the thing, though. So rewind to 2014, when Ukraine was first invaded by the Russians on Donbas region, and I'm pretty sure you heard of the Azov. The battalion or whatever. They basically said this, and this is one of the biggest. This is what scares not just the Russians in general, but everybody else, because there's so many nuclear reactors in Ukraine, and there's so many spent fuel. Well, guess what? The Ukrainian government and the Azov battalion was basically saying, you know what? If no one's going to help us get these people out of our country and stop killing us, well, guess what? We're just going to make a dirty nuke. And then everybody's ears perked up, and they're like, well, hey, if they do that, then, it's going to throw the balance off everything. They're going to hurt, the Russians and themselves and everybody else around them,
Right.
So it's bad business for everybody. And after that, that's when all of these countries, they started to help Ukraine out. And that's the only, like I said, that's the only way that something could have happened there was these guys are poking around. They have no idea what they're looking at. They're in a nuclear power station, and that's the only way, shit could have hit the fan. So they're the last people there. And right now they're in Zaporizhzhia, at the Zaporizhzhia power plant. And I don't think it's true. I don't think they're that stupid to
blow it up.
Wire it up with bombs everywhere. It'd be pretty stupid on their behalf because you don't know which way the wind current's going to go, and this is the area that you want, right?
So before we wrap this up, what do you think so let's say, like, what's your opinion on the future of that Chernobyl area? Are they going to leave it? Are they going to try to extract things? Because I know that there is some conspiracy theories supposedly about, U.S. extracting things from there, and they said that they weren't, and somebody was saying that they were, or like, do you think there is just going to be untouched? It'll never be an area to go back to because of the radionuclides in the atmosphere at the time, and now more recently that they're saying it is like slowly becoming active, and they're saying that they're afraid that it could explode again. So like, what are your thoughts real quick before we wrap this up again, as far as like the future of the Chernobyl area in general?
Well, two things. One, this works out good for the the Russians, because now they know that Ukrainians can't go down there and get spent fuel rods to build a bomb, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the only people that are benefiting out of this. Like, you have to understand, there are we call them scientists, or people that what are these guys called? They look after the nuclear power station, but at the same time they're monitoring all this stuff, what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
So if nobody but these guys were there, this would have never happened. As far as the Americans pulling stuff out, there's so much uranium. Like, one of the biggest uranium deposits in the world are actually in Canada. A lot of people don't know that.
Wow.
But Canada has some of the greatest, the most massive deposits of natural resources in the entire world, aside from whatever you hear. So if they really needed uranium that bad, they would just go to Canada and buy it from them. It wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, too easy.
It makes no sense. There's no reason for the U.S. government to be flying uranium from one side of the world to the other. Like, what good does it do for them? They have more than enough of their own. Now, what's interesting is there was actually an agreement made by the U.S. government and the Russian government about taking their spent fuel rods and completely destroying the spent fuel, so that you cannot make more nuclear weapons. Now, apparently, I don't know if this is true or not, but I remember reading up about this years ago, that the Russian government created a nuclear power plant that basically burns up the entire fuel rod. Excuse me. And there's nothing left afterwards. What the U.S. government did was they simply took the spent fuel, and they basically diluted it. They diluted it, I don't know with exactly what chemical it was, but they diluted it. So, I don't know. I mean, if they really needed it, they could just, use what they already have, so.
Okay. Well,
yeah.
So this episode, everybody, a little bit over the Wagner Group, and then we tapered into Chernobyl, and we're going to end it here for part 3. This is going to be, like I said, like an ongoing series. If you've been following from the start, in part 1, trying to get Eli on here, whenever we can, once a week or whatever the case may be, given his schedule, of course, and his personal life. Again, this is his alias, is Eli, and we are not showing his face because he volunteers over there and is active off and on. So for protection purposes, we are obviously not showing him and giving the real name out there. But if you like this episode, share it, give it a thumbs up, comment, what you guys want to see next or what else you want to hear from Eli. He's very knowledgeable. He was over there, born in Ukraine. So this helps out a lot to get, to bring history and almost current events to you guys is what's going on currently. So yeah, we'll look forward to part 4, and we'll come up with some more topics for you guys. And again, I appreciate you coming on, brother. This is, I love doing these little episodes, man. This is great, quick, in and out, informative for people. So, but yeah, I appreciate it. And then everybody stay tuned for part 4. Thank you.